So I'd like to welcome up our panelists for the technology frontiers in blockchain. So today we're very pleased to be joined by Avery Ching of Aptos, Jeremy Clover of Circle, as well as Mahdi Zamani of Visa. So thank you all for being here. Professor John Song will moderate this panel, and we really appreciate these technology leaders joining us and sharing these insights with us. We look forward to hearing.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a really exciting panel on technology. So we'll just quickly do some intro. Maybe each of you can just briefly introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. I'm Avery Ching, CTO and co-founder at Aptos Labs. I worked at Meta for a decade before this on data infrastructure, and then the last 3 years on blockchain. For those of you who've heard about the Libra project, I was the tech lead for that, and we're really excited to see that technology make its way through into Aptos. Great to meet you all.
I'm Jeremy Clover. I'm the VP of Engineering, or AVP of Engineering over at Circle, and I support the data team, so that's data science, data engineering, and data platform. I was also at Meta for 10 years. I was in the reality labs and artificial intelligence side of Meta, but very familiar with Libra.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mahdi Zamani. I'm the Director of Cryptography Solutions team at Visa. I've been with Visa for about 7 years now. And initially, I was part of Visa Research, leading a team of researchers working on digital currency at Visa. And more recently, I switched to the product team, working on some of the new initiatives at Visa, including tokenization, that I will hopefully talk about more later.
Great. Thank you. So yeah, let's get started. So the first question is, so there has been explosive interest in blockchain, and there's a lot of new and exciting technological innovations. And so the first question is, so what are the technological innovations that you and or your organization are most excited about and believe that has the potential for the biggest impact broadly in industry?
Oh, I'll start with this one then. I'll try to keep it not too long because there's a lot I'm really excited about. But I guess getting started, how many of you have used a wallet today with blockchain? Oh, this is fantastic, all of you almost. So if you've used it, I think you would all recognize probably it's not something that's ready to hand to your mom, your sister, your brother who may be non-technical and who's not familiar with how to secure a mnemonic or other kind of funds of that nature. And so what we've been really excited about is providing kind of very much Web 2-based solutions for Web 3 technology at Aptos. So a couple of things, earlier Don talked about zero-knowledge proofs, for example, and why those are transformative. They're transformative definitely for how we scale L2s. They're also transformative for the security and privacy properties. One thing we've also been using though is if you want to log into your account, like say with a Google login or any other kind of OpenID provider, we've been able to kind of generate zero-knowledge proofs that can tie to a blockchain account on the back end. And this means that how you log into today's internet websites, just 2 clicks, can be applied to that blockchain-based technology. And that's really exciting for onboarding the 5 billion internet users into crypto. Another thing we've been excited about is the idea of using passkeys. So many of you log into your phone with Face ID, Touch ID. By being able to add those WebAuthn signatures into the blockchain and support them natively, you can have a transaction that is signed by staring at your phone or logging into your account that way as well. And so these kind of technologies, I think, we're super excited about how they can kind of bring the masses into blockchain. Other things is secure on-chain randomness is a very interesting problem. How do you kind of generate a random number? Very hard in computer science, right? That's something you can actually do with the blockchain, kind of secure by the same proof-of-stake guarantees you have regarding safety and liveness. And finally, I think the last set of challenges we're really excited about is the advancements we made with respect to scalability and latency on the Aptos blockchain using a parallelized and pipeline stack. And being able to support today kind of end-to-end, say 25,000 plus transactions per second in a mainnet-like setting. We have Visa here, so Visa does 150 million transactions a day. So 13 times what Visa can do in a blockchain. We're really excited about the fact that now these transactions can happen in an on-chain way instantly with instant finality. So a lot of exciting things happening. I think we're really at that cusp where blockchain infrastructure is getting to the point where it can be adopted by billions of people. And we've got to make sure that we kind of keep pushing forward with the adoption piece, getting ecosystem involved, getting large enterprises like the ones here involved to help push that to a larger set of people.
I would say similarly, what we're doing at Circle, a lot of it is removing friction for developers. I mean, if you're a developer in the blockchain world and you are trying to write an application that interacts with a blockchain or even a number of blockchains, it ain't easy right now. It's a very difficult process. So there's definitely the consumer side, which there's tons of friction. Very similarly, trying to explain to my family how to set up a MetaMask wallet and why it's important to do that and how to secure it, and then they very quickly go and save the seed key and 1Password, and 1Password gets hacked, and they're gone, right? We've lost them as a customer in crypto. So it's really about how do you remove friction, how do you make it easy for regular people to use, for people who aren't the early adopters, and then how do you help that scale? That's absolutely something that we're doing. We're developing a lot of SDKs, a lot of very simple installs for developers so they can hit the ground running here. I think the other thing I'm excited about is a little bit more personal to my function, which is data science and data, which is the blockchain is incredibly transparent, and you get to see everything that goes on there. All you have to do is know how to read it. And so there's an amazing amount of information out there over how people are using it, how funds are being used, how applications are being used, that really gives us a lot of insight into where this ecosystem is going in the direction of this ecosystem. A lot of it right now is trading, but you're starting to see these forays into new areas like social with Warpcaster and Farcaster and Friend.tech. And so for us, it's amazing to be able to have almost in real time your finger on the pulse of innovation and watch it evolve very, very specifically and see what people are attracted to and what products have product market fit, what products don't have product market fit, and how that scales over time. It's really a fascinating world to be in from the data point of view. So I think that's the other thing we're excited about is the transparency and the visibility that we get into the ecosystem.
Thank you, Jeremy. So on the Visa side, as a traditional finance technology company, we have a lot of partners, like a lot of banks that today, as issuers and acquirers, we process their transactions. So this was a very natural question for us, that how we can be supportive of this community as much as possible. And one of the areas that has got a lot of traction lately is the tokenization. You guys probably have heard about it. That especially what we call like the TradFi, those entities or parties that were very active in the traditional finance world, now wanted to bring their assets and liabilities on the blockchains. Banks, commercial banks, we hear quite a lot. Our partners are interested to bring their commercial bank money, or what we call also the bank liability, their deposits, tokenize them on the blockchain. Central banks, from many years ago, they've started, a lot of central banks have shown interest in that as well. And this is an area that we feel that it's, because of the way that technology got evolved, is a lot of fragmentation exists. Different network providers, layer ones, layer two providers, and this is also, has become a big challenge for this new ecosystem, because one of the main reasons that we were I think the community has been interested in tokenization is to be interoperate with other systems. And that's one of the beauties of tokens. Tokens, once you bring an asset or a deposit into a blockchain, that allows you to seamlessly use it in different finance applications and cut some of those overheads that exist from legal expenses, bureaucracy, and the settlement issues, the delays, they're not available over the weekend. So this is an area that we wanted to focus on and leverage and see how we can really bring those benefits that blockchain bring to this ecosystem. And tokenization in particular is an area that we feel that needs a lot of these connections across different networks. And as Visa, a company that has excelled over the years, decades, on connecting different networks that banks have with their deposits, central banks with their central bank money, we've been always able to connect them seamlessly and allow to be everywhere, to use our cards everywhere to make payments, this is an area that we wanted to also do. Of course, we don't want to centralize things. We wanted to adapt ourselves to the fundamentals of this area, which is that how we can play a role of a trustless entity in this domain. And one of them is, of course, how we can bridge between these networks in a very trustless way without having those limitations that exist in the bridges in the blockchain area.
Great, great. Yeah, thank you. So yes, our esteemed panelists have shared a lot about exciting technological innovations. And so now let's dive in a little bit deeper. So following Magdi, what you talked about in terms of the use cases at Visa. So there are a couple of follow-on questions. So one, when you talk about tokenization and talk about the use case at Visa, so what's Visa's perspective in terms of using private versus public blockchains?
That's a very good question. So we feel that both of them will exist, and they need to coexist and work with each other. Some of our partners, and what I'm saying is pretty much based on what we've heard, is that they're interested to have these partitions very isolated because of lack of the privacy, and the expenses that privacy-preserving technology has over the blockchain. They wanted to isolate themselves in separate networks. And on the other hand, we've seen a lot of banks that are interested in stablecoins. There's been a huge amount of money, USDC, for example, a lot of successful networks, and these partners are asking that how we can launch our own, stablecoins. We have assets. We wanted to bring in some of those make them some stablecoins on blockchain, and invest in, say, startups or different, places that need, fast and easy access to money, the assets that the bank has. So I would say both of them will coexist, and depending on how much the technology makes progress, especially privacy, because it is not just something we can say we prefer public blockchain over private blockchain. Regulations don't let banks to put their, especially deposits of customers, on public chains. The way that they exist, Bank Secrecy Act, GBRI, there are several privacy regulations that do not allow banks to put those information on the blockchain. So that's one of the areas that we feel that we need to work a lot on privacy-preserving tokenization, and to be able to, over time, bring these tokens into public chain. The reason is that the overhead of deploying a new blockchain, a private blockchain, it will cause fragmentation. Bridging across these networks has its own costs. But unfortunately, the privacy technology has not there been yet to be able to launch all of these with the requirements that these commercial banks have on public chains.
Great, great, thank you. And then with that, can you also talk a little bit, what do you think as the remaining challenges in order to fulfill the use case that you mentioned?
So on the privacy side, we've been experimenting quite a lot. One of the very early works in privacy that we did jointly with Stanford was Zether, a confidential token mechanism on Ethereum, how we can have this homomorphic encryption, if you guys are familiar with, be used in order to keep the balances of these ERC20 tokens on the blockchain completely confidential. So this is an area that initially was interesting. We got some progress, but things are not at a level that a mainstream payment provider like Visa can really do these zero-knowledge proofs at the rate that they can be done today to really take this into the market, to a huge market that exists for these tokens right now. So I would say, from a technology perspective, the main thing for us is to focus on how we can bring this overhead of zero-knowledge proof generation and verification. Of course, verification usually with ZK snarks, they're fast. We can do it on the blockchain verification, but the proof time is usually high. And we do not have enough players that can assist clients, for example, in generating these proofs as they're making transactions on the blockchain. So I would say these are the main areas that I think in the research and technology we need to focus on next.
Great, great. Yeah, thank you, thank you. So next, let's move on to Jeremy from Circle. Yeah, Circle has really done a lot of really great development and helping developers to build further as well. So first, can you share what are the key technical lessons that you have learned in doing development at Circle that you can share with developers? And also, in your opinion, what are the current pain points for developers to enter into the Web3 and blockchain space?
Yeah, I'll start with the second one first, which the pain points is really, if you're going to be working with blockchains, they all work differently, right? So you have to have different types of understanding, different types of integration, different types of languages to work with any one of these blockchains, and they all have different shortcomings. Some are faster than others, some are more expensive than others. And so I think what we've been able to try to do is really create an abstraction layer between developers and these blockchains so that they can very easily, the hope is we create a suite of tools that allow developers to very easily do this, and as part of those suite of tools, they can get USDC, which is our primary product, which is the stable coin, so then now you can transact in your application very easily and you can move capital back and forth. I think the biggest thing is time to market, especially with, so much has happened since COVID with the way that development is starting to work and the way that you're seeing these companies being funded. People are doing more with less. And so particularly with the advancements we're seeing in like artificial intelligence and how people can use artificial intelligence to accelerate their development process, like the name of the game is make it easy and make it fast for everyone right now. And that's what AI does as a tool, and that's what we're trying to provide for developers and consumers, is just make it very easy so that people cannot think too much about spending months and months and months on the code and really start to iterate and test those hypotheses quickly. So that's what we want to bring to the developer market. What was the first part of the question again?
What are the key technical lessons that you have learned?
Oh gosh, yeah. So technical lessons. So my technical lessons are a little bit more again on the kind of the blockchain ingestion side. It's difficult. It's difficult to do these things at scale consistently. Like we want to be able to look at, for example, on any given day, what are the balances that wallets are holding. To be able to do that, to be able to aggregate that data, to be able to process that data and scale is very hard. There is a ton of blockchain data out there. And it is just order of magnitude over the last couple of months accelerated based on what we're seeing with, I don't know if any of you are out there in the meme coin frenzy that was going on. There's just a lot of transactions now, and kind of moving through those transactions is difficult for several technical reasons. Like one of them is the scale of the data set. We know how to work with big data, but the way that this data is processed is very different, and it varies chain by chain. Sometimes you can pull things like balances directly out of the chain. Sometimes the balance only exists as an aggregate of everything that happened up until that point. Those are very, very difficult to work with. And so for us, the technical problems are really ones of understanding and monitoring scale, and how do we scale our ability to work with things that scale very quickly. And so if you're using traditional databases to parse blockchains, you've got a double problem. And so we've been fortunate enough that we use Google BigQuery right now for most of our public blockchains, and that's been scaling pretty well. But not every solution does. I mean, if you're doing custom Postgres databases, you're not going to get there. So.
Great, thanks. Yeah, this I think will lead to my next question as well. So you talked about transparency. Getting information on chain, and also the scale of the data. So as I understand, at Circle also you have a big data team as well. So can you talk a little bit what is the role of a broader data team, including data engineering, analytics, and data science at a place like Circle?
Yeah, I mean, data engineering is really your foundation of everything. So I know there's a bunch of data scientists in here. If you are going to be joining a company that is all data scientists, you are in for some hurt, because 90% of your time is going to be spent pre-processing, cleaning, aggregating, structuring data, and not actually doing the data science work. So really, data engineering is the foundation of what any team does, because they make sure that the data is clean, it's structured, it's usable, it's high quality, and then it allows everybody else to move very quickly off of that. For us, analytics is a little more backward-looking, like what has happened. Data science is a little more forward-looking, what could happen. So data science, we tend to focus a lot on the science part of it and not the data part, which is what are the hypotheses that we have, how do we articulate those hypotheses incredibly clearly, and then how do we make sure that that articulation is falsifiable in a way that we can test it. And so that's really what we do with data. And the things that we've been monitoring that we're really excited to watch is this kind of proliferation of use cases. Most of the use cases up until now have been trading and speculative. And we're starting to see real use cases and real consumer products. And it comes in fits and starts. Some of them are retentive, some of them aren't, some of them have product market fit, some don't. But there's really starting to be this, this new innovation layer within things like, watching what's going on with Farcaster is pretty amazing. Watching, decentralized social in a way that a couple of years ago, you wouldn't have thought that this would have worked, but you had the friend tech thing, which kind of worked and then kind of didn't, and then you have Farcaster, and now that's working and it's kind of taking off a little bit. So for us, it's just really exciting to see the use cases go beyond the speculative, because for us, in the stablecoin side of the world, like, that means that there's new markets that are being developed. It's not necessarily about us reaching the existing markets. It's like, not only do we want to see the, our piece of the pie grow bigger, but it's great to watch the pie itself grow. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. So now let's move on to Avery from Aptos, being a layer 1 blockchain, and also one of the fastest to launch, I think. So can you also share what are the key technical lessons that you have learned in development of Aptos that you can share with the developers?
Sure. I think, I just want to say I commensurate with the challenges folks have brought up, Maddie. We've been working on things like veiled tokens, which are kind of an intermediary between fully transparent and non-transparent transactions. These transactions, the transfer amounts are hidden, but the senders are known, and senders and receivers are known. And that provides kind of hopefully a middle ground between the cost that you pay for these kind of really expensive zero-knowledge proof-based transactions and the speed that you need for public access. I think it's just mainly a factor of like 10, 20 times slower. So we can still get thousands of transactions a second, which is still pretty darn good. And we'll keep pushing the technology envelope because people really want those things to be private when they think about money moving across the world. No one wants to know I went to McDonald's for coffee every morning, for example. And I think Jeremy's point is really an underserved one. When you think about you have a very high throughput blockchain, people don't really think about the cost to indexing that blockchain. If I'm doing 30,000 transactions per second in Aptos, I might have a write amplification of 5x that, because each transaction I have to write like 5 times 5 different tables. And so now I'm really doing like 150,000 transactions per second to the database, which is brutal and like pretty much no ingester is really ready for today. So we have to work really hard on actually supporting very highly scalable indexing solutions, not just for ourselves, but also for the customers of the blockchain. If an entity marketplace wants to build an index and track their transactions very rapidly, they have to have a custom indexing solution that plugs into kind of a backend for ingestion. Or there's a club that actually wants to track orders in a different way. They've got to have their own custom indexing solution. So these are really interesting challenges that kind of if you're leading the space in high throughput blockchain bandwidth, you have to kind of serve these problems as well, which are not really well known at the time. The other thing I think that's really interesting for us to solve is how many of you write code? Just a quick show of hands. Okay, good, most of us. How many of you have written bug-free code? Right, so that's one of the biggest challenges right now in our smart contract space, where you've seen billions of dollars being lost to hacks, especially against bridges. And so what we spent a lot of time on is building out Move, which is a new way of kind of thinking about smart contract development, where it's very, very small set of features that can be used, but those features are very safe and very well protected behind the ownership of the signer of the objects, signer of the resources, and having the kind of primitives which control the way the minting and burning is done. You can't just arbitrarily mint resources, burn them, drop them on the floor. They have to be conserved as a part of that process. And thinking about the smart contract development phase through Move, through things like the Move Prover, which is a way to formally verify properties of your smart contract, being able to test all the scenarios without you having to write unit tests for every single one of them, we think is a massive step change in the way that we get from ideation to production for the smart contract developers, and getting more applications into the field that we can trust.
Oh, great, thank you. And this leads to my next question too, which is Move. So Move as a smart contract language has a lot of advantages. So can you share a little bit in terms of how the adoption has been, and what are the challenges that you have seen in the adoption of?
Great question. So I think we've seen, for those of you familiar with Rust to some degree, if you've played with Rust a little bit, there is a high learning curve. it takes a bit to understand, like, why does my compiler keep telling me I got so many bugs in my code, not letting me actually run this and execute it. But once you get past that, you actually get much, much better productivity. And I think that's the way you should think about Move to some degree. It's going to make things, limit you in terms of what you can do. There's no dynamic dispatch today. There's no way, the easy ways to shoot yourself in the foot. But it might be a little more different if you're coming from the Solidity background. If you're coming from the Rust background, it actually feel very natural to you. And so what we've seen is that for those that are kind of familiar with either programming in Solidity or even using other languages out there for contract development, it can be a little bit of a hurdle for developers to move to come onto Move. At the same time, though, those who start using it, they love it. And so we've been able to see is that the developers building on top of Aptos, there are hundreds of developers today. I think the latest Electric Capital report showed about, 400 plus monthly active developers in public repos. There's a lot more building in private repos as well. They start to really enjoy the simplicity of it, the ability to use things like formal verification to have extra high assurance in their code bases, reduces the auditing costs for them. And when they deploy, they just feel a lot more confident about their code being out there and having even the ability to upgrade that code under certain constraints. And so we've been really excited to see the community building around Move in a way that's also very composable. We have something called the Move decompiler, which just recently was announced, that allows anyone to take any of the bytecode that's out there, decompile it, and understand exactly how to rewrite that smart contract, whether it's a DEX, a borrow-lend protocol, or some other kind of application out there. And so being able to, the other advantage of Move is really being the composability of it. Those modules that are deployed, they have public functions that be called. You can actually get the idea of reuse of software. We always hear about that as something great. Everyone ends up copy pasting everything in other languages. Having be able to use those libraries and see those libraries get upgraded through things like the Aptos framework, which are kind of core set of primitives for the blockchain. That framework itself is also formally verified for security properties. And so when you think about this layering of formally verified software on top of formally verified software and composability, it becomes much more realistic to imagine how that world works very safely and securely.
Great, thank you. So now this is a question for all the panelists. So as of course, the blockchain Web3 space is very exciting. There's a lot of really fast advancement. And another area, of course, everyone here is also really excited about. That's another area that has blazing speed, fast advancement, which is the area of AI. Which also is really, really exciting, and I've been teaching a number of classes in AI as well. So one question for all the panelists, this is going to be a question for some of the other panelists, for the other panels as well, is given these two areas are very different, but both are really exciting and fast-moving, what do you think about, what's your thoughts in terms of in the space of decentralization and AI? Do you think the two has much to do with each other? There's interesting things to do in the intersection, or just in general, what do you think about these two areas?
So maybe I can go first. I think something I'm not actively, working on AI. My expertise in decentralized systems, privacy. But one thing that I see that happened in the especially the Bitcoin world, and I think would be a good candidate for the rise of these Gen AI, GPTs and different things that we see, is that there is a huge shortage of computational power in AI. We all know that. GPTs are still slow. We can custom make them for a specific use case. But we still need them to be as smart as possible. One thing that we saw in Bitcoin was huge amount of hash power, was dedicated, the computational power to solve these, puzzles. And you'll be surprised to know that this network, after about 15 years, 16 years from its launch, it has about 20 gigawatts of computational power being dedicated. And what we're hearing from companies like Microsoft, Facebook, the amount of computation that they're already putting is in the order of a few gigawatts. So it's still way smaller than Bitcoin. So this is a huge capacity in a decentralized network to bring that through commodity hardware, that this massive amount of computational power for Gen AI data, the training and also the inference. I think It is not necessarily that decentralized, trustless nature of that work that would play a lot here, as much as we saw in the financial, applications. But still, these, contributions from individual, computation power providers around the world. Still, we have to make sure that they're not cheating, they're not providing malicious, inputs into these GPTs, or they're not doing something shady. And that is what we learned from blockchain space, that we might be able to apply in that domain. Of course, we are very early, and I'm not active in this area, but I'm really hoping that to see part of that huge computational power that we could raise through Bitcoin network be also used not just for random, puzzle solving in proof of work, but for something useful. And that demand is, I think, in Gen AI right now.
I have a long spiel to go on here, so do you want to? Okay. AI, we think, is really, really important, especially with blockchain. So, a quick question. When you look at content on social media, how do you know whether that content's been generated, is authentic, been moderated, modified in any shape and form? It's really, really hard to tell these days, right? We see Sora, we see other great technologies out there that can make everything look very realistic. And so when we think about blockchain is a great immutable ledger that kind of shows that kind of proof of lineage, proof of authenticity, and having the only kind of way to guarantee that's, to have attestation around that content is really through signatures that can be trusted, that are signed, right? So we believe that content verification and being able to sign content that attest to what that content is, whether it's something I snapped directly from my phone, something I did modify using some LLM or some other technique, is really, really important. And we see also organizations like the C2PA starting to watermark their content to actually show this. And there are aspects in which the blockchain can really make this a lot better, because you have those keys that, if they're rotated over time, you understand that lineage of change. You have a very accurate high-performance clock, which is going to be immutable with the blockchain. And if you see derivative content, you can actually show when content came first, what content came second. And we're actually working with a number of different teams who are trying to solve these problems. People that are content providers, whether photographers, videographers, people that want to know that, if their content is being used, are they going to be paid for it? Are they going to be compensated for that? Or do they have the rights and permissions to use that content? Where are those permissions stored? Blockchain provides a very, very natural place for that. Another area besides just content verification is going to be around the area of, I think Maddie just talked about GPUs, right? There's a tremendous amount of GPU power out there. One of our partners is IO.net. They've secured 500,000 GPUs for decentralized compute. And that kind of compute power is going to be managed through infrastructure like the blockchain, where you can have payment rails for how you have the kind of provider of that hardware, the user of that hardware, and then kind of the third party, which is something to facilitate that transfer, all taking part in the different economics. And leveraging blockchain for that is a really nice and natural solution for decentralized use of AI training or inference. And so that's another area we're really, really excited about. I think a third area that we're excited about is the area of kind of AI bots to some degree. And having today, if you want to have a trading bot, or you want to have a bot that goes and executes kind of your ideas, your expectations, you don't have those kind of controls through on-chain. Means like you can actually transact with payments. You can transact with buying and selling NFTs, and this can actually happen on your behalf through a bot. And that bot can be then controlled with settings that are stored in the blockchain. They can transact on the blockchain, and we believe that's another very, very interesting use of AI going forward.
Great, thank you.
I think it's going to be hard to add to what's already here. My initial reaction whenever I hear like blockchain and AI, because the two tend to coexist, is it's like the pitch deck blender. It's like you just throw AI in there, throw blockchain, you'll get funded. I think I don't know is the answer for a lot of this AI stuff. I think the problem is there's a lot of exploration right now, but especially within the AI world and within the blockchain world. For anybody who's worked on this space, if you want to start getting involved in AI in any like deep capacity at a company, you're going to be spending most of your time with lawyers. And so I think the challenge right now is that there's no clarity over what you can and you can't do, and what will and won't be allowed. And so there's a lot of risk aversion when people want to go into this space and figure out like, okay, how can we tack on AI? And I think the signal that we're going to be looking for, at least internally, when we think about AI, particularly on the blockchain, is what does this do? What does the blockchain do natively better than can be done in private systems? And I think you really touched on it, which is anything that it has sequential dependencies. That is where the blockchain will do it. So I think when it comes to, proof of ownership, proof of lineage, that's where it's going to be, but it's going to be all the back-end work. I don't think you're going to see a lot of hosting of large language models on the blockchain. Like, it just ain't going to happen. Or training. And then the other thing I think is like the governance layer of how do you, I think there's a cool project out there that's called Akash Network. And it's like, okay, how do you have distributed compute where you can like compensate those people using almost like a token system, so where people can put requests, so it's a decentralized AWS. So you may see systems like that where there's like a tokenization that can reward decentralized actors, but they're going to be using their own machinery and then exchanging on the blockchain, not necessarily using the blockchain for AI. So long story short, we don't know. I think there's a lot of cool explorations. It's really awesome to watch, but it really does change week to week.
Great, yeah, thank you. Yes, I think there has been a lot of excitement in this space, like you said. I think some is about putting buzzwords together, but I do hope, right, in the future, decentralization and AI, they are going to meet in some substantial ways in the future. If you think about what agents, when we really have autonomous agents, what they are going to do, how they may operate autonomously together. I think a lot of exciting things will happen then. So now, maybe let's come to the last question. What kind of final thoughts you have that you wanted to share with developers and the students for future technical developments in the space?
I heard a line the other day that I really liked when people were talking about the blockchain, and particularly the blockchain in regard to finance, is, I think it was a friend of mine said something like, Web3 companies, they're speed running every financial mistake of the last 100 years. And I thought that was such a fascinating idea because, it was like proposed cynically. But when you think about it, like what's going on with the way that it's decentralized and the way that people are learning and the transparency and the knowledge that people are accumulating, what it does mean is that the development that is happening in this space versus private markets is literally faster than anything else going on. And so for me, I think my final thoughts are like, stick with it. The speed of this space is amazing, and we are catching up to what you see is going on in a lot of the TradFi markets. But TradFi markets, just because of the history, because of the infrastructure, because of regulatory bodies, they move a lot slower. Blockchain has the ability to leap this entire space, just bring us far, far further ahead in much, much less time. But it's just going to take curiosity. It's going to take focus, and it's. I think the people in this room hopefully are the ones that have it. So I think my final thoughts is I'm looking forward to what you all figure out next.
So maybe I can go next. So since I don't have like background in the startup world, as somebody that has worked with like a company like a traditional finance company, that's something that I completely agree with. Things are going very slow, and incumbents, I think it's not just because they're not scared of what is happening. The process, the way that they can take the technology into market. Is very slow. Regulations, how they want to do things very carefully. So since your question was about like the engineers, the developers, how they can do it, at least I think a message that I have for those heads of engineering teams inside these incumbent companies like Visa is to think that to move much more agile. And don't necessarily go the way that your existing products have been built. This is like a groundbreaking, this is like a paradigm shift for these businesses. So it's not just a new product that you wanted to add to the portfolio of your company as much as, a lot of other products, for example, at Visa that I've seen that are getting launched. This is very different. And CEOs, execs, they need to be aware of this and try to move their, teams in a way. And a lot of lessons learned from successful startups like Aptos or Circle, how they can allocate these resources in a much more efficient way to be able to attract, first of all, I think the big talent that is already going to great startups, great people like that the other panelists that are here. These are, a lot of them have worked in big tech companies and eventually found that the fastest way to get what they want is in the startup setting. And I think this is one of the things that we need to be aware. And my message is not necessarily about for just the developers, but for the broader engineering and also execs in this domain that are actively trying to push this domain forward in the TradFi world.
Those are great messages. I think the only thing I want to add on here is that as students, like you guys are probably thinking a lot about your careers going forward. Do you want to do AI? Do you want to blockchain? Do you want to work at a large company? There's a lot of things you can do out there. My pitch to you for blockchain would be, it's a chance to really rethink the way the internet was designed and think about how decentralized, democratized internet ought to be. And to build the applications, like as Imani said, like these applications haven't been built yet. They haven't been designed yet. We see that as the technology is approaching the point at which a lot of the Web 2 functions can be done in Web 3 for very, very little cost and for very, very high throughput and supported at scale, to support the largest applications in the world, whether it's the next phase of Twitter or the next phase of Facebook or other products. It is definitely a great time to go ahead and take your shot and build on Web 3 and see what happens. We've seen in Aptos has been live for like a year and a half. Tens of millions of dollars have been raised for projects building on top of Aptos. There are hundreds of projects building today. And this is just one of many different L1s, L2s in the space. There's an amazing opportunity for you to forge your own future and forge the future of the internet in the blockchain space. And we would be really excited to see what you all can build.
Great. With that, let's thank our great panel. Thank you.